Welcome to the Resolve Use Case Series. In this series, I'll be walking us through 7 automations that you should be prioritizing today. We'll also have live demonstrations of an example workflow to help you envision what that automated workflow in your own organization would look like. Today, we're tackling employee onboarding. Before we begin, I want to help you quantify the impact of a poor onboarding experience. 93% of employers agree that poor onboarding can lead to employee turnover. 24 days is the average number of days it takes for any organization to onboard an employee. That includes setting up apps, setting up documentation, etc., that can end up costing around $4,000 per employee. 800 million is the collective cost that's estimated. An organization is not an organization, collectively organizations are going to lose due to voluntary employee turnover. With that, I want to welcome our guest speakers for today. Moore, who runs HR at Resolve, and Derek, who has demoed, POC'd, and implemented this for our many customers many times. Moore, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Moore. I am the HR manager as Resolve Systems, and happy to share a little bit about my experience with onboarding.
Derek.
Thank you so much, Brenda. My name is Derek Pascarella, and I head up our sales engineering here in North America. Happy to be on.
So, Moore, let's start with you. I don't think anybody else knows better what the challenges of this process are. I know in your past life you have run through this process manually. Can you help us visualize what that manual process and what the perils are?
Absolutely. So I would say that one of the biggest challenges is that there are so many moving pieces with onboarding. You have a constant back and forth with IT. You have to reach out to different people. You have to reach out to different teams. You have to rely on them to set up new hires with multiple systems. And on top of that, you have to make sure that they were properly set up. And the reality of the situation is that a manual process leaves room for mistakes. So as HR, you always end up chasing people to get the job done. And it's very time consuming, which I don't think a lot of people realize how much back work there is to it, because there's a lot of steps involved, right? So it's quite easy for the process to get stuck somewhere along the road, and it causes delays with onboarding. There are a lot of organizations that actually go through this process multiple times a month. So you can imagine the amount of time and effort that it takes to get it right.
Absolutely. Funnily enough, my own experience with onboarding is in my past life. I somebody ended up misspelling my name and setting that account for me in Salesforce. And I think it took close to a month for me to chase the person, get the wrong account deactivated, get the right account activated. And it was not a good experience because I wasn't able to log into Salesforce. I was constantly pinging my coworkers and they were not happy about it.
Exactly. And to your point, the onboarding experience is part of the, the company welcoming the employee into the organization. So as a company, you want your employee to have a great experience and make sure that they have everything they need for a smooth onboarding experience. And the smoother the process is, the faster you bring new hires up to speed. So cases like this don't happen and you don't feel like you have to rely on your new coworkers for information just to be able to get started.
Absolutely. However, that has kind of changed for you now, where you are in a good place with automation helping you, tackle some of that stuff. So give us a perspective on what that same process looks like automated.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's quite simple. All I do now is I file an IT ticket, I check the boxes that I need for that employee, and the automation is kicked off automatically. I don't really have to do a lot of things. So not only is it super time consuming from my end, but it just gives me the peace of mind to know that it was done and it was done right, and I don't have to chase everyone and bother everyone. And when the employee starts, I know they're set up properly and they can just get started.
Yeah, and just the efficiency of that process automated. If you have to do it like multiple times, I can't imagine just how much of a, like you said, peace of mind you must be having.
Exactly. It's kind of guarantees a really good first day or first week or month to your employee. And we only really get one chance to make a first impression. So that first period of the employee coming in, I think is really, really important.
Well, thank you so much for giving us that perspective. And that's I think a great segue for us to go into our next section where, Derek, can you help us visualize what that example workflow in Resolve would look like?
Absolutely. All right. So I've got my screen shared here, and I'm actually showing the Resolve Action solution here. And this view we have up on the screen now is what we call our workflow designer. So this is where we actually visually build out everything from the most simple to the most complex IT processes. And it's achieved, as I said, through an entirely visual approach, but also leveraging a huge library of pre-built integrations and various activities. So we're thinking everything across the house with IT, especially for something like onboarding. Your on-premise or Azure Active Directory, Exchange, Office 365, various applications that may need to have access, like Okta, in today's more SSO-centric world. And all of this, as I said, built without a single line of code. Now, to kick this off, similar to what you heard Moore share, because here at Resolve, we love eating our own food and we love automating as much as we can in-house, I'm actually going to switch over to my ticketing platform, where I'm going to submit this request here to onboard a new employee. In today's example, it's Mr. Robert Falcone here in beautiful New York City. And the way we've actually got this configured is so that upon the submission of this ticket, Resolve will intercept and then kick off the automated onboarding process. Now, just to be clear, today's example is coming from this particular ticket, but this could be coming from virtually any external system. So whether we're talking about your Workdays, your Bamboo HR, this could even be triggered from an email. There's a tremendous degree of flexibility with the Resolve solution. And also pay attention here to some of these input fields. I know that looking at tickets is something a lot of us have to do all the time. It's not exactly exciting, but bear with me a second. The way this is configured dictates so that depending on the location of an employee, for example, I said New York City here, and depending on things like job code, they will actually be provided different levels or different types of access, different degrees of permission, and access to different types of organizational units within Active Directory. And like you heard Moore mention, kind of just ticking the boxes, here below we've got some samples of common applications, your AD, your Office 365, Okta, etc. Now I'm going to go ahead and submit this ticket, switch back over to the Resolve side, and I'm actually going to go to our live dashboard. And in our live dashboard, we actually can get certain high-level KPIs, metrics, as well as a live running snapshot of the system. And you notice here, our onboarding automation is running right now. So I can actually drill down into the audit trail for a live step-by-step execution to see exactly what the automation is doing. But even better, if I switch back to my ticket, scroll down to the notes, I'll actually see that as each action is being taken, the Resolve automation is posting those updates bidirectionally back to the ticket. So there's total, a bidirectional integration there. So the information is at our fingertips as somebody who may be checking in on that ticket later. Let me go ahead and refresh this view here inside of my ITSM. And as we can see, we're almost done with the process. We've done everything here from Active Directory to Office 365, provisioning the license for them, ServiceNow account in this example, as well as Okta, PagerDuty, and then the terminal step will be actually setting specific network drive permissions for, again, their type of employee code in their particular location. And as you can see, the entire process is completed. And that took about, 20, 30 seconds. And as you heard Moore share, tracking down people from all different departments within an organization to get things done not only is time consuming, but let's be honest, it's quite the headache. And here with this automated approach, everything from start to finish was achieved without any human intervention. But I did want to mention that even though today's example was completely autonomous from end to end, it also is quite common that an onboarding process may be broken out piecemeal into several smaller parts, right? Segmented, maybe so that different managers have to approve specific pieces or something to that effect. Now, I just want to be very clear, it doesn't have to be what we saw today where it just starts and it finishes and that's done. We can definitely seek out human approval at any step. So we can break this onboarding process into smaller pieces, as per whatever your organization kind of requires. Because if there's one thing we've learned in, let's see, it's 20 some odd years of automation, it's that no two organizations are doing anything exactly the same. But the great thing about our product is that we can conform to your specific processes. And that's it, Brenda. Thanks for giving me a chance to demo the product here.
That's great. Thank you, Derek. And like you mentioned, this is an example workflow where you had 4 or 5 apps, and it can get as complicated as as an organization needs. Like there could be 15, 16 apps, right, Derek? And it would still not take that very long.
Absolutely. And we can also do this in parallel, concurrently. So you think about today's example was one single employee, but what if you deal with contractors frequently? What if you bring on 5, 10, 20 people at a time, whatever the case may be? We can handle all of those concurrently and get it done very, very quickly.
So, Derek, I wanted to ask you this. We're hearing employee onboarding automation a lot, right? Everybody's talking about it. What makes us well suited for automating such a process? Like, why would somebody choose Resolve?
Great question. Part of it, I would say, kind of hearkening back to what I mentioned before about how, no two organizations are doing anything, especially onboarding alike. One thing that the Resolve solution offers its users and its customers is an infinite degree of flexibility. So really, it doesn't matter how your process looks, no matter how much of a snowflake you think your process is. And believe me, I'm sure it can be very, very snowflakey. Our solution can handle it. It's catered to be able to deal with that level of complexity and that level of customization. And on the other side of that, it's not just that you can architect out the logical flow to one of these processes very well with Resolve, but also you don't have to reinvent the wheel because of the library of pre-built integrations and content that we offer. So Resolve has something we call our automation or content exchange. You can think of it kind of like, your modern day app store where customers and users can go in and say, okay, maybe say Workday or as I said before, Bamboo HR, whatever the case is part of my process. Let me go ahead and type that in. Oh, look at that. A whole pre-built suite of integration actions. Download it, import it into your instance, and you're off to the races. So really it's that rapid time to value, getting off the ground, going from zero to fully automated, like that.
That's great. And that's what I think you mean by the simplistic nature of building this automation. For somebody who's doing this for the first time, is they have all of these tools at their disposal to just drag and drop. Right.
Yep.
Another thing I want to bring up is RPA too, right? Because RPA is great at doing some things, and then we do a great job complementing RPA with the back end stuff. So any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And this is really a great conversation, and it actually comes up a lot. I think a lot of people have grown familiar with the concept of, let's say, enterprise scale automation vis-a-vis RPA, because as you said, Brenda, RPA is great at a lot of things. But really, it tends to focus on business processes. And if we take a step back to understand how RPA works, it largely, at least in its root and at its core, is a lot of GUI manipulation, right? Manipulation of front-end screen scraping, things like that, essentially mimicking the human experience behind a computer terminal, right? Go to this button, click that, capture whatever this text is. And that is fantastic. I cannot express enough how great it is, especially for all of these legacy business systems that, let's say, don't have an API or some command line interface or some, back-end protocol with which we can communicate. So the complementary nature really starts to come into play when you think of RPA being the thing that can interact with all of those very unique systems, but then let's say passing the baton, as it were, over to a back-end IT process automation solution like Resolve for things like, okay, now that we've taken X, Y, and Z out of the HR system or the record system, hey, Resolve, can you go provision these 20 accounts in Active Directory and also make sure you add them to the appropriate security groups, do it fast, and add anything else that we need to do. Send them emails to give them a welcome packet. Maybe even send them, their tax documents PDFs so that we can automatically request that they return them. So really you get that tremendous degree of it's like a complementary symbiotic relationship. And once Resolve finishes, we can also send that message right on back to the RPA tool to say, our part is done, continue with the process.
That's such a, I think that's great to hear, because I'm sure a lot of our customers are using us to complement their RPA automation, just to complete, like you said, where RPA is great with these tasks, and ITPA, which is IT process automation, aka Resolve, is great with these tasks. So thank you, Derek, for that great conversation. And please leave us questions and comments, and if you have any questions, please bring them up now. I'm happy to post them to our guest speakers. But at this point, I would really like to thank everybody for joining us. Please join us again, same time next week. We have our second automation, which is employee offboarding. We will walk you through similar workflow. We have our guest speakers joining in more. I believe you're there in our next session as well. So join us to hear perspectives and to understand what that example workflow would look like and in Resolve. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.